Welcome to the Cove Podcast, your stop for PME on the go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Cove Podcast. I'm Captain Todd Lemper, and today I'm joined by Lieutenant Colonel Trevor Watson. He's the current Deputy Director of Recruiting Delivery and was the Commanding Officer of the 812th Regiment up in Darwin. And he's here today, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about recruiting. It's a topic I think that we often... It's heavily publicised, and ADF jobs and ADF careers is heavily publicised. However, I think that we still don't know what happens behind the curtain. And I think that today's episode, or the purpose of this, is to talk about the current recruiting challenges, definitely, but lift the veil a little bit on how ADF careers or DFR or sort of recruiting system works. I know, because we've spoken before the episode, sir, but the you sort of thought, coming from Commanding Officer of 812, in the field a fair bit, and we spent a lot of time together in training areas. And then I suppose the natural progression is go to a post-command job in a more staff role. But you've completely sort of gone the opposite way and become more of a commanding officer in your second posting than you thought, I suppose. How's your new job? How is it?
So, I didn't know. Someone called me about halfway through my last year as a CO and they said, hey, have you thought about Deputy Director of Recruiting Delivery at DFR? And I didn't even know it was a job, firstly. And then I thought, well, recruiting, obviously it's something that's really important. I was told that at the time we were shifting from, or we're conducting a contract transition from previous contractor or capability partner from Manpower Group to Adecco. I was like, oh, well, you can make a difference. Then I turned up and realised I was posting from a previous commanding officer job into the functional commanding officer for DFR, but the admin commander for all Army, and then I work with the Air Force and the Navy CEOs across Australia. So there's obviously 16 centres. It's equivalent to the size of what 812 was in terms of staffing, but it includes CIRCAT 3, 5, 7, 6, clearly a capability partner alongside us, which we shifted, as everyone may or may not know, on the 1st of July, we moved from Manpower Group and to Adecco, which has been a challenging period. Subsequently tried to educate myself on things like change management. And the one thing that I can tell people is that change is never easy. And that understates all of the challenges, because even just transitioning our ADF workforce, so we'll change over 200 people, close to 200 people at the end of the year across DFR, and the new ADF people will post in. So thankfully we're growing. We'll get 70 extra people next year, which will make it a hell of a lot easier, because it's actually a candidate. If I was to define recruiting as a simple term, it would be it's a human-to-human endeavour. There is definitely systems in place to support it, that being computer systems, but it takes an ADF member to talk to someone, make them feel valued, and that's actually going to be the reason they join. Their drive, their initiative, their motivation, their resilience, that's a part of it, but the big point is their ability to connect, or more importantly, our ability to connect with them.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk, if we get a chance at the end of the episode, about getting selected to go to a recruiting centre, and the sort of attributes you're looking for through selection for those jobs. But I suppose to start back at you talked about the contractor shift, and I want to talk about more so about the sort of the argument that's currently at play with the ADF being currently 4,400 personnel under strength. Trying to implement ways to fix that, which is widening the eligibility criteria, streamlining the recruitment process, improve processes more broadly for faster recruiting, and then not so much your job in the current context, but I hope we talk about being a CEO at 812 for the retention initiatives. But I suppose, what does that contract shift, and noting it's just happened, what risks or limitations, and more importantly, the opportunities have you seen, having seen that contract shift over in your second year of tenure in the job?
I think it was so important to do. There is a perception of where we are now, and what I can probably say with the experience that I've had is that we would not be anywhere near, we wouldn't be better off, and I don't think we'd be have the potential to be as successful as my successor will feel. There's one thing that I would sort of say as I'm posting out, I was like, I'd wish we'd got to a point where I was like, oh yes, this is successful. But meaningful change takes time. It takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of commitment to what we're trying to achieve. We're definitely seeing improvement, and I can talk about certainly numbers, but that's part of the reason why we changed, right? Like at the end of the day, for 20 years, the most people we'd ever enlisted into the Australian Defence Force in 1 year was 8,000. In 2017, the target was 7,300 people across full-time and part-time. That includes, that's not just Army, that's obviously Air Force and Navy, Army full-time, Army Reserve. In that year, they achieved close to 97%, so like 7,100 people. That's a huge achievement. But 7,300 people is not the 10,512 people that were actually being tasked to recruit this year. So it's easy to present percentages. You know, last year we achieved somewhere like 6,500 people. That was actually pretty amazing. It looks terrible on percent. It's pretty amazing considering the medical and psych capacity that we had, that we were able to do it. And it was done on the back of some really amazing ADF and some really amazing Adecco people that were dealing with the candidates face to face. So there's heaps of initiatives. There's too many to actually implement. Key to every planning and operation is to prioritise what you want to do. One thing that we want to do is we want to change our candidate management system. So we've been using a system called Powerforce. I would say 90% of the people that are in Army were enlisted in the last 20 years, meaning that they were recruited under the previous contract, meaning they were recruited using Powerforce, the same system which has extreme limitations. And so updating that system is one of the things we want to do, but it has to come behind a whole heap of other initiatives, one of which is opening opportunities for non-citizens from Five Eyes nations to join the ADF as long as they meet certain criteria.
You talked to capacity in the initial sense, and obviously we're just learning the new capacity in the new contract of being a deco, I suppose. But like, talk to capacity. Like, where do we find the choke points? You know what I mean? If we talk, I know you know the numbers, but if we talk about how many people walk up to DFR and really want to enlist in, you know, what everyone assumes is a huge employment crisis, and it is tough, absolutely. But we have a number of people coming up to DFR trying to get into the ADF in certain capacities. Where's the choke points, I suppose, or where is that limited capacity? Where do we see the friction points?
So it's my favourite question to ask people who have a perception of what DFR is. And I'll say, how many people do you think applied for the ADF in the last 12 months? And they'll have seen a whole heap of articles. They'll see everyone's sort of commentary about DFR and recruiting crisis. And what I can tell them is that they always underestimate the numbers. I even had one guy say that there was 2,000 people applied in the last 12 months. It's 64,500 people applied in the last 12 months. There's currently over 34,000 people being managed daily as a candidate. For a target of 10,512, 34,000 sounds like a lot. The real challenge for DFR is we need them to be applying for the jobs that we need, because we've got over 300 jobs. There's a ridiculous number of people that are applying to be a pilot in the Air Force. So over 1,500 candidates applying to be a pilot in the Air Force. At ADFA, there's 800. My last look was like 864 officer aviation applicants to go to ADFA next year. There's 20 jobs. So 800 people for 20 jobs. So obviously it's an attractive job. It's the things that we need people to do that are so important to our organisation, and they aren't either well known by civilians because, you know, it's a job. I exist in one, right? Artillery. No one really comes to the door of DFR and go, yes, you know what I want to be? Artillery operator. That doesn't mean it's not important. Doesn't mean it's an awesome job. It's about someone in DFR being able to explain what's the best thing about being an artillery, and I'll tell them it's always the people. I'll tell them it's the humility of a gunner. They don't think there's no missions that gunners set for themselves. So no one can tell you how it smells. No one can tell you how it feels to do the job other than the person who's actually done it. And that's actually an important part to get someone who is applying and wants to be in the ADF. They'll see the list of jobs. They'll apply for something that they've either seen in a movie, no shortage of people wanting to be EOD or dog handlers.
Tankies, like
Cavalrymen,
armoured corps.
yeah.
Being a DO at ADFA, it's just like, what corps do you want, mate? First year ADFA training officer. And they're always like, I think I want armoured corps. It's like, why? Well, I don't know. I just, Fury seemed like an awesome movie. It's like, yeah, cool. But like, this is a career that might spend 15
And it was a good movie,
years.
right?
Like, yeah.
But it's just,
it's
that's
so
the thing.
hard to get it to like, and I think from an outsider looking in, and we've worked before at a gun regiment, but like the JFT, living the Joint Fires Team Commander dream, it is an absolutely awesome job, and it like is not heavily publicised enough. And I've tried to do my bit to get people in your core at ADFA as well. But like from a outsider looking in, I'm like, this is the coolest job you could ever do, and I didn't realise, like, to a certain degree, I knew what it was, but until I got to 812, I was like, this JFT thing is absolutely awesome. You've got 6 guys, and you get to man OPs and sit in supporting arms inside a battle group, and the autonomy is unparalleled.
Yeah.
I suppose let's bring it forward. So you're looking to go to DFR. And you want to get posted there, and I suppose this goes to the selection criteria. But how difficult is it to pick people who genuinely you think? And I suppose the main effort is, can you get the message across about your job and others in the army to civilian candidates and make them want to enlist into these amazing jobs that we have?
Yeah. So what we've done, and because we've been under the construct of the new contract, we've been able to adapt some of our processes. So I had a problem when I first marched in that someone who applies to join the ADF was essentially being allocated an ADF recruiter to do a career coaching interview. Now, if you're applying for Army as your first preference, you're allocated to an Air Force person, then you come in for your defence interview. So these are the only 2 times you come across a defence person through the process under the old model. You would then do your defence interview with a Navy WO or CPO. To me, that was a problem, because you never talk to a person from the job or trade they're in. Now, DFR doesn't have enough people, or can you have one from every single role? But you need to have people that have either experienced it or can talk to it. So what I can guarantee candidates today is that if they apply and they're applying for an Army job, they'll be allocated to an Army recruiter. The Army recruiter can put them in contact with another member within the whole system, which I think is a really good process. But they will have experienced, or at least have a minimum experience of what Army training is like. Like you posting to an artillery regiment plus other locations, you will have had experience across different corps. It's my greatest day in DFR was talking an Air Force pilot applicant. His preference was Air Force pilot, Air Force engineer, and then another job. And I talked him into that's not really a fair way to say it. Talked him into is not what I did. I appropriately career matched the individual with, and all I did was I listened to what he liked. I listened to who he was, and I don't do career coaching. I just happened to be in the centre at one time and sat down with this candidate, and he ended up selecting artillery observer as his job, because we need him. But one of the reasons, one of the reasons I was able to do that is, like, when do you want to be in? It's probably the key question that I ask people, because if you want to be in within the next 6 months, and this comes down to, and many people have heard, 100% in 100 days. That's the contract, right? 100% in 100 days. 100 days is a hard thing to achieve when you're applying for a job that there's 800 people ahead of you. If you want to be an engineer right now, combat engineer in Army, then I have to be really open with you and say, mate, it's a long line. And my favourite analogy is, if you go to Dreamworld and you want to do this, the ride that everyone wants to do, then there's a lineup. At the end of that line, there's actually a nice little height differentiation, which I like the correlation there as well. But there's a heap of other rides that you can line up for, which the line is more attuned to when you want to join. There are 309 jobs. We're pretty confident we've got one that will suit you. But if you want to be a medic, if you want to be a clearance diver, if you want to be a pilot, if you want to be armoured crew operator, yes, there are jobs, but it will take longer than it takes to become a petroleum operator, a technician in pretty much anything. If we need trades, and we need a technician, people, vehicle mechanics, we need artillery, we need communicators, we need warehouse operators, we need clerks, and they're all really important jobs. The problem is there's a perception that they're not as attractive as others. So that's why we need good people from across ADF. Particularly, Army has 63% of the target. 20% is ARES, but 40% of our target is full-time Army. So, that's not an even split. There's 784 infantry targets. There's no shortage of people lining up to be infantry. But there's going to be an opportunity for us to offer them a job in another corps, another role, Why do they like infantry? They certainly don't know enough about it. They've read about it on adfcareers.gov.au and they go, oh, yeah, no worries, I've read about this, sounds good. They've certainly seen enough movies, but our job is to try and inform them about the role. So I think that's why we need good people from the ADF to put up their hands to say, I'm going to go to DFR. It's an opportunity. In my personal opinion, it's a privilege to participate in someone's recruiting journey. They can't do it without you, but you also can't do it without them. So they're the most important part of it.
No, it makes sense. And I suppose I just want to hone back on or go back to the 100 days, the contract being 100 days. Obviously, we've taken sometimes in the past, and you talked about the last 20 years, there's sort of 300 days for us to actually get people enlisted. And like that was the current statistic that was going
350.
Around. 350.
350 average, right? Now, some people have been trying to join since 2003. And I think that's like their desire. I probably think they're not suitable. In general, I think that we've got a really robust system of selecting people, and even then people will join and they won't complete training. There's actually a pretty large percentage of people that won't complete recruit course. So if I talk down to one RTB, and there's about, I think it's probably about an average of about 15% of people don't complete their recruit course. A lot of them voluntary separate in the first 3 weeks. And so one of the questions I ask my DIs to say to the candidates during their defence interview is, how are you not going to be one of those 20%? And then the follow-on question needs to be, how are you going to help someone else not to be the 20%? Because I think if you can take it away about how you're feeling and make it about how someone else is feeling, I think you're already on the right path to being a good soldier, sailor or aviator, it doesn't matter. Same as RMC, right? Like I used to be an instructor in 3rd class, and there was certainly tears because you're tired, you're hungry, you're separated from your normal support network. But DFR's job is to make sure that we provide capability, not targets. So we need to make sure, and services are the decider on what the standard is. DFR doesn't decide what Army standard is. Again, another concept, and I know I'm sort of jumping around a little bit, but I think that this is a relevant point because people will say the standard has dropped. And the entry standard, the requirement to be in defence is not about, it is a reduction, particularly for combat support or combat service supply. That has gone down to 6.1 for a beep test, right? And you go, okay, no worries. The BFA standard never dropped. So the standard is just about, hey, we're bringing people in to giving them an opportunity. But that's not a fitness standard. That's a susceptibility to injury assessment. Someone can, run 2.4, but we do a beat test deliberately, right? Your ability to turn, your ability to put a little bit of heart in, your ability to rotate, get past that point, functional exercise. We don't need you to be the fittest person in the world. We actually need you to not get injured during training so we have an opportunity to build your fitness. And thinking that people exist in large numbers that meet that fitness standard previously, it's like, no, that's just not what I'm saying. It's not. We need to provide an opportunity for these people to serve so we can help them.
So the drop in standard or a reduction in the standard, everyone knows that it needs to happen, but a lot of people are hypercritical about what it means further on down the track. And there's been arguments about sort of pushing the risk further on. So instead of DFR accepting the risk or not accepting the risk, now RMC, and I'll talk to CEO RMC next Friday as well about the new curriculum. We're going to go through what the modules look like. So, DFR sort of reduce the standards because, like we've talked about what the goals are, what the targets are, and how, the direction that's been applied to DFR. So at what point, and then I want to sort of draw back on the CO 812 stuff, like now seeing people that are a little bit more risky in the physical space, or you taking on some more sort of duties in preparing them for the field and the like. What sort of, can you explain how difficult that is, or...
Yeah, it's an important point because it's actually DFR is just enforcing, is not setting the standards, they're actually just enforcing the standard. So that comes down to everything from education to medical standard for the roles, but the service is the one who dictates exactly what the standard they're willing to accept. And I think that the important part is that you can't do that in isolation. Training institutions, either it's the, IETs or, one RTB or your schoolhouse, whatever it is, they need to understand that the standard has not changed, but we are sending potentially a candidate that has a lower physical fitness achievement. And once they get to the unit, it never was a problem from my perspective. People don't fail because it's a hard test. I've never sort of considered it a hard test. I've always sort of certainly looked at some 21-year-old kids who borderline a foot taller than me. That's not saying they're tall. It's probably more about my own height. But it's I just like, you take 2 steps, you take 1 step for every 2 of mine, and why am I going there? And the kid could run. It's mental. It's his heart was given up before his body was. And I think that's where we need to work on helping these people. But you got to get them in. Firstly, you got to get them in, and then you've got to engender a teamwork and a focus. I probably would say that in my experience, we've struggled to provide focus post-operations once our operational tempo dropped down. And it's really pleasing to see, and I was up in Darwin recently, it was really pleasing to see the amount of opportunities that were being provided. So Resolute, they've just sent their 1 Brigade soccer team to Timor. They're going to the Philippines. They've just got back from Butterworth. And people are saying, no, I want more opportunities. And that's exactly what they're being able to do. In 812, it was really fortunate that we were able to get the gun battery to Hawaii. And you know what? I didn't have one discipline issue in the time as soon as we went after that, because they were focused on training as a team to make sure that they went over there and represented themselves and the organisation really well. And I think that's actually key. Leadership's actually pretty easy when you've got a focus for your team, and that's regardless of whether it's a gun regiment, whether it's a infantry company, a transport section. It doesn't matter. As long as you give your team a focus, then they're going to be on that. You're not going to have as many issues. But more importantly, you bring your people along with you. So everyone comes from a variety of different backgrounds. That's great for us. How are you going to lead from that perspective? I did want to go back to a couple of things that you sort of said about recruiting and where our shortfalls are, because I think that's really an important question. Is like, well, why does it suck so bad, right? The perception is it sucks so bad, and I don't think you're wrong. It does suck so bad, but we're not sitting idly by, just going, oh, well, this is it, guys. There's a whole heap of efforts that are being put in. And I'll tell you right now, the reason it sucks so bad is because you need to assess somewhere like 660 people a week to get 220 people out. So that's because medically there is no candidate turns up and doesn't have an issue. That doesn't mean they can't join. It does mean that they need to go and do some additional specialist testing. There's about 77% of people that do an assessment will fail psych for a variety of different reasons, and they have the right of appeal and a whole heap of other processes that we have in place. But when we contract transition in July last year, we were doing 180 psych interviews, 180 medicals. So you're doing a third of what you need. The fact that we got 60% of our target with a third capacity, that was done probably because we had a number of candidates that we had processed previously, so we're able to keep on top of it. And most things, if you change something in DFR, it's about 6 months before it makes a difference. As of today, we're doing 595 psych interviews and about 498 medical appointments. So we're well on the way to the 600 we need. Importantly, you need people for the right jobs, though. So if you're just pushing people through for pilot and you're just doing the assessments, they're just going to sit it. We're just going to waste a whole heap of money assessing people in a medical and a psych capacity that we don't need. So the challenge is 80% of the target's actually easy to achieve if you have the capacity. The last 20, it's the hard. That last 20% is just as hard as the first 80, and that's because what you're trying to find is people that fill really specialist roles, so medical, professional services, or the jobs that historically no one wants to do. The one thing that I hammer on about is we need petroleum operators, we need warehouse, we need communicators. So 662 is probably one of those trades that we need heavily. There's no shortage of people lining up to be a cyber 664, but not enough given the size of the target for 662. So that's something that I personally track. I love numbers, so it's not that hard. But we need people to actually say, well, what's good about 662? How are you going to sell it?
I want to talk, so you have to make a call in the selection board, and this is lifting that veil on, DFR. But like, I ring that DFR rep, or do I ring the ADF careers rep, or is it, what's it called? Defence jobs. Like, what organisation? And I suppose this is far more complex than the jobs in a normal unit where you try service plus a number of contracting and a contract to change. But sort of who does what? I suppose ADF careers, DFR. Is that? And who? Yeah. What's the makeup of the support force that you've got?
So I work in DFR, right? That's the easiest part of this, is that it's the internal organisation as Defence Force Recruiting. Our centres are ADF careers centres. When a candidate goes in, they're engaging with ADF careers. So the candidate-facing side of DFR is ADF careers. We changed last year, and it was called Master Brand. The reason we did that is because for a whole heap of marketing purposes, where at one point we would have Army in market, then there would be ARES in market, then Navy would be in market, and then Air Force. Now we're always in market for everything. So ADF Careers and the most recent advertising that went out has resulted in probably the largest applications. If you take out COVID, where everyone, at least up until when JobSeeker was released, there was over 80,000 applications in that 12-month period. They didn't actually eventuate into jobs, but that's a great position, and it probably highlights the impact of civilian and international circumstances, even job market, that impact what DFR does. But we deliberately shifted to ADF Careers. So to answer your question, ADF Careers is where there's a candidate-facing side. You will talk to a person from ADF Careers because it'll involve a candidate. But I work for DFR, if that makes sense. And DFR Inc. includes what we term the Commonwealth, which is the ADF members, including APS, that work in Defence Force Recruiting across the country. So 17 locations, 16 centres, and our Deco capability partner. It's really funny. I think some people think of organisations, they certainly thought of Manpower Group as the big organisation, but within that organisation there was just some incredible people whose passion for the ADF, they didn't work in the ADF, they worked for Manpower Group, they work currently, or they now work for a Deco, or they come on board with a Deco, and their passion is to allow someone to have the opportunity to serve in the Defence Force. So separate the human side from the organisational side, because organisations clearly have a role, but organisations are filled with people trying to do a really good thing for the candidates that we're looking after. My people tend to look after about 200 candidates. Some of our Deco colleagues are looking after over 600. So that's a challenging circumstance when we've got to balance and prioritise, and obviously the person that wants to join, their only priority is them. We have to obviously put it in there. We would love to be able to have a one-to-one. That's clearly not going to happen with 34,000 candidates.
Yeah, and I suppose if we talk to a candidate coming to an ADF Careers a building and moving through the first time, I suppose they're getting paired up with a person from their chosen service, or to get guided through the process by someone who actually understands the job. But what I suppose I want to talk about, we talked about capacity in the system itself, and being able to do the throughput and how quickly the processes can happen, but more on the side of, an entrant, what's normally blocking most entrants as they come through. And I want to caveat this in the next question, or the follow on, I want to talk about initiatives, because there's a number of different initiatives to prepare people to sort of for entry and all that sort of stuff. But in the initial sense, what's blocking most candidates to join?
Oh, if I took aside the assessment capacity, I would say candidate behaviour. The largest contributor to time in pipeline is candidate behaviour. So, for example, if you applied today, you'd be sent a job opportunities assessment, which is the aptitude test. It's now done, we're currently trialling a model where it's slightly different from what you and I would have experienced. And so you do that aptitude test. Now you have 21 days to do that aptitude test. So you could take 21 days or you could do it the same day. It's probably rare. I would say that the average number of people do it somewhere between 7 and 10 days since receiving the aptitude test. Now, once you receive that aptitude test and you complete it, it arrives on my team. My team will book you into a career coaching interview somewhere between 3 and 10 days from the receipt of that results of that aptitude test. That's an important timeline because if you push someone the next day, they feel too pressured. So then what we know is that people don't want to be pushed through, and that's there's certainly acceleration has to be very relevant to the speed at which a candidate wants to move through the pipeline. So we book them in, we talk to them about the job. Our job is to not just progress them for what they want, it's what we need aligned to who they are. Now, they then have to do a medical health questionnaire. They then have to go to the assessment pool. In an ideal world, if they're there for something that we need and there is a job and a target, they should be booked near immediately to a psychological assessment, a defence interview, and an entry-level medical examination. We don't tend to book someone unless they are interested within 14 days, again, for the same reasons of booking travel or, not wanting to force them into an activity. There's other areas, obviously, we need to do a physical fitness assessment. We have to give them a loo. They have 14 days. At each of these stages, there is an exponential drop-off. If you don't immediately engage, the correlation between them doing something and then us reacting needs to be near instantaneously. But I've said previously, DFR is the most ghosted organisation in Australia because it's actually really hard to get hold of candidates, and we've recently changed our processes from allowing them to book themselves to a career coaching interview to booking it. And would you believe they turn up? So we wanted to give them choice. We wanted to give them a good candidate experience. Young people and old people, to be fair, just weren't taking the power. So it's not like going to a hairdresser and trying to book in for an appointment or, any booking you want to do, you go in and you book it. This is not what they do. What they do is they go, oh, yeah, no worries, I'll do it. Yeah, no worries. And so I had 1,700 overdue career coaching interviews because they weren't booking themselves in. So we took the power back, booked them, and last year we were doing 2,400 career coaching interviews a month. Now we're doing 4,400. So just that one change, and then that's been picked up by Adecco recently, where now we're doing the same thing for assessments. I could talk about that till the cows come home. So it's a really good move because I treat it like an interview. People turn up to job interviews. If they don't, well, you learnt something new. So.
And I think the assumption is that standards have to drop to get more applicants in, but you're saying the main block, the main thing that stops individuals is their attitude. You're still screening for attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Sometimes I saw this in a unit. I remember we were sending those guys to Hawaii and we had to sit them in a room to do their visa app. You could give it to them and take it home, and there's diggers that wanted to go overseas, and they were bloody good diggers, right? I'd have pretty big soft spot for them, right? But at the same time, we literally had to sit down, put a pen in their hand and get them to do a visa for their own benefit. Now, you had that opportunity to sit them down. You don't have that with a candidate. So we have to take the opportunities, and this comes back to making someone feel valued, right? Like if they answer your phone call, if they feel like you're their advocate, if they feel like you're as invested in you can't be more invested, but you have to be as invested as a person, because if you're too invested, you're needy, and that's not a good recruiting position to come from. If I need you, they're probably, this seems a little bit too much. So sometimes we just have to pull the trigger and say, well, man, if you don't want it, that's okay. And then we see them re-engage. So it's not an easy circumstance because every candidate is different. Yeah,
and I suppose to talk, you definitely stole one of my questions at the start of the interview, which was what are the priority jobs? And you've spoken about it all the time. But trying to get to the applicant still needs a really good attitude. And we've dropped the fitness standards a touch at DFR specifically. However, no standards have dropped throughout the trainings pipeline and then into the units. The BFR hasn't changed.
Yeah, and the way it's described is we haven't changed the standard, we've just increased the run-up. So you have more time to do it. In actual fact, can anyone really say that in their own time they're going to get themselves to that standard? Like I know I need to train with someone else. I know my motivation comes from training with someone else. I've never been fitter than when I was in a unit because if I was literally turning up to PT and someone else was doing it. That's where I got my motivation from. It's probably the biggest challenge I find in a staff officer job is actually setting aside time to actually do PT. And now we're trying to ask someone who hasn't had that level of experience, isn't at that point in their life to do that, then they're just not built. And sometimes maybe the argument is, well, they've got to prove that they want this. Okay, no worries. It won't be 64,000 candidates that we're looking at. It's a lot less. And it won't necessarily be the ones we want because sometimes no one join the organisation and remain that person. They all had the opportunity to grow, develop both personally and professionally. And that's what I think our organisation does best.
Yeah, and I suppose the talking about the priority jobs, right, and trying to get, I mean, we can post people to DFR to talk about the jobs they do, and you only get so many applicants. You probably get more applicants. You definitely get more applicants for DFR than you do positions, but you'll only be able to put certain jobs in certain places. It's a constant struggle. More broadly, though, I suppose I want to talk to the newest initiative that's just come out, I suppose, in terms of recruiting friends or ADF members currently recruiting people who aren't inside the organisation and seeing them through the through the training pipeline into those priority jobs.
Yeah.
Because it's targeting those, if you're in a job that is really cool, but trying to sell those jobs that you currently do to applicants or candidates, potential candidates. Talk me through the new initiative with that sort of, or the approach.
Yeah, so it's funny. Anything you try and do will always have a critic. So the Defence Force has been trying to bring in a referral app for as long as I've been in DFR. The referral app it's not new. It's been used by other countries. They've definitely got their opinion on it. And so essentially the concept is if you're an ADF member and you refer someone to join the ADF, they get through recruiting, doesn't matter what job they get in, and for a full-time job, they then complete their training, 12 months worth of in service, then an ADF member will be provided, they'll be paid $1,000 for that referral. It's a really good initiative, and whilst people will try and find a thing wrong with it, the whole concept is if you posted a DFR, you can't do it, right? So let me put that one out there first up. So if you posted a DFR, you can't just see this candidate turn up and then next thing you know, hey, can you scan this ForceNet QR code for me? That's not how it's going to work. So you can't do it. If you're involved with DFR in any way, shape or form, you cannot do it. You must be an ADF member. You can be a reservist. If you refer someone, they apply, they join, then you'll be given $1,000. Now, there's a long payoff, right? Like no one is surprising. We talked about the average day in pipeline before. So let's imagine it takes 350 days to get through the pipeline. It's close to a year. Then they have to do a year's worth of service. You're not going to see that $1,000 for 2 years. But here's the real benefit of the referral app. The referral app is not, we want to reward those people because it's not about the referral. It's about helping someone through that journey, both through training. I talked about kids falling out of their recruit course. They can now call you, right, and say, hey, I'm struggling. Now, having someone to call is about that support and mentorship and say, hey, bro, it is hard. This is what it's like. Your experience actually matters. More importantly, this is not about me going out and saying, oh, how can I get an extra $1,000 because I don't have the networks that our soldiers have. We want them to go out and talk positively about the career. And, hey, I'm the first to sort of tell you that the right of the soldier is the whinge. Like that's my favourite thing to do as well. Behind judging. But so I get it. And it's really hard to sometimes when someone says, oh, what's work like? You naturally are inclined to not tell people it's awesome. You don't talk about the positive things. You talk about the things that challenge you or that are funny, or people are more inclined to say, oh, this happened, or I had to sweep shade, or, whatever you had to do, paint rocks, which is all the silly jokes that people sort of use. And if you ever have to do that, please let me know because that's not cool. But secondly, this is just about people going home at Christmas saying, yeah, I'm in the ADF. I love what I do. This is what I do. Have you thought about joining? If you want, I'm happy to, refer you. And the obligation is not just to refer. The obligation is to actually support them through. My job is I consider a bit of a privilege because I've definitely tried to encourage people. There's no shortage of people in the ADF, regardless of their rank, that know someone that is attempting to apply for the ADF. And I'd probably hear most of those people have some level of negative experience. I get it. I would love for everyone to have the perfect experience and going through our recruitment process, and I'd tell you we're getting there. But if you know someone then that is going through the pipeline, then you should tell DFR, because your advocacy for them is exactly what I've been doing. So there's no shortage of people that will tell me, hey, my family friend or my kid is having an issue, they're applying, this is where they're stuck, and I can make one call, one phone call, one email, and I can get, and I'm not going to give that person back, there's obviously personal privacy things, but I can either unclog or I can at least have an ADF member look into it, and we can fix it. I'd love to do that for 34,000 people. It's not necessarily relevant, but that's what we're asking people to do here. We're asking people to advocate for someone that they referred, and so we're not giving $1,000 for referring people. We're giving you $1,000 to help someone through what currently is quite a long recruiting journey and through their initial stages of employment in the ADF. And what better opportunity than to give someone the same opportunity that we were afforded. If you saw me when I was 18, you're more likely to have stolen my wallet than offer me a job in the ADF, because I was pretty young, pretty innocent, pretty probably romanticised view of the world, and it wasn't like, I don't know that I was the picture of an ADF officer. I guarantee you I definitely wasn't. But I have had the opportunity to work in this organisation for a long period of time now. And the thing that I value is the opportunity to help others or lift other people up and give them similar opportunities that I had. So, that's what we're offering people. It's a privilege to serve in the Defence Force, but the opportunities that people have. And so it's really easy. And it's arguably comes back to the point that we're talking about, who's the right person for DFR. If you want to help people through that journey, and that's something that you can feel really proud of, then that you're the sort of person that wants to serve in DFR, you need to make people feel valued before you are selling a job. This is not about selling a job. It's about making people feel valued, because they'll want to join. If my experience at events is, I don't ask somebody, do you want to join the ADF? That's a silly question, and also a really transactional question. And normally their answer is either an embarrassed no or an over ambitious yes. What I tend to do is try to ask them about them, because I need them to walk away feeling like I was interested in who they were, because I'm a representative of the organisation. And if the organisation is making them feel valued, then that's an organisation they want to join.
Yeah, and I suppose that value comes in the same way from an individual perspective on the referral. It's like you talked about before, not knowing what you need to do for fitness to prepare, and that steep learning curve before you get in the organisation, and the shock of year one familiarisation training, or it's called Army Foundational Training now, or recruit, going to Kapuka. It's a shock, right? So if you've got someone and that genuinely is invested in you through that training pipeline, and be like, this is what you need to do, a bit more pack marching. It might feel weird, but you need to do a bit of hiking before you get there or whatever. And this is what the weight and sort of Ks you should do. Recruit, Kapuka's going to be shocked, but everyone goes through it. Thousands of people have gone through Kapuka. So just remember that when you're in your darkest times in day 2 or day 3.
And that's why I say, how are you going to help someone else?
I suppose an extension of that is do it for 2 years or 3 years as a DFR military recruiter, or in one of your ADF careers depots. Thank you so much for coming on and for your time today, sir. Thank you very much.
Good on you, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Cove Podcast. Explore our channel for more great audio PME content. Also, visit us at cove.army.gov.au for hundreds of additional resources. The Cove, the learning home of the Australian profession of arms.